the farmer's market in town? Yeah, how cool is that? Well, we get to have a stall in the farmer's market the day of the car show. So if anybody wants to volunteer and cover an hour or so down there at the farmer's market, we're going to have our booths set up with some of our cool stuff on it for giveaways. So that's pretty exciting for us.
What's that date?
The date is the 27th. No, I'm sorry, the 28th. The 28th is the same day as the car show. That's a super deal. And on the 24th, we're painting pumpkins on the canvas. So if you'd like to do that, that is, let's see, $30 for members and $35 for non-members. We do it right here in this meeting room, and we have wine and cheese and whatever else you want to bring, and we paint, and it's a great evening. So you might want to keep that in mind too. And before I end, there are 2 history points I need to give you that you need to know for tonight. And that one is this building that you are in right now we call the Carmichael home, because the Carmichael family lived here longer than anyone. So AP and Philip Carmichael raised their 8 children in this house. And the other thing we need to tell you is, who does not know who Chief William McIntosh is? Everybody knows. Chief William McIntosh signed that Treaty of Indian Springs. His direct descendant visited here in the 1980s and the 1990s. Chief Dode McIntosh came here, actually stayed with Nancy, didn't he? At one point.
He visited in the home.
Yes, So we have Billie Jane McIntosh, who wrote that book that you see up there about Chief William McIntosh and the murder that took place. She's also a direct descendant. And just last week we had in here Dr. Gary McIntosh, who is a direct descendant of our Princess Senoia, who of course was Chief McIntosh's mother. So that's a pretty big deal and a whole long line of McIntoshes. But on, what's the date of this one?
27th.
On the 27th, which is the day before the farmer's market, Dr. McIntosh will be here for a greet and meet from 1 to 4. So mark your calendars and come by. Bring your families, bring your friends. Come, and he's a charming gentleman and loves to talk about his family's history. And if you stop by, you won't be sorry. He's really, really cool. So, okay, there are my 2 history lessons, the McIntoshes and the Carmen. All right, I'm done with my museum.
Okay.
Oh, out there, they can't hear me. Well, I do have to use it. Sorry.
Sorry, Maureen, but I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Okay. Whoa. All right. Here we go. Tonight, we're going to take a look back at our past, take a peek at our future, and spend a little time in today. Oh, yes. And a special guest appearance at the end of the program. I'm Maureen Schuyler, and I'm the director of the History Museum that is going to celebrate 10 years of operation in 2020. But the Senoia Area Historical Society has been around a lot longer than that. 42 years. Yes. For those of you taking notes, I did say 42 years. Wait, we don't have anybody in here. Yeah. I'm sorry.
We were waiting for the grand entrance.
We're going to leave it out here for you, Maureen.
Wait a minute. Where's my crew? Thanks, Nancy. Is it working? So we're going to begin. We're going to begin with our distant past, as Nancy Roy walks us back to the beginning of time for this society. Nancy has the distinction of being a charter member of the Historical Society and one of our most active members even today. Nancy?
I'll try not to share too much information with you because I do ad-lib a lot. I'll try to stick to the facts as much as I can, but it's difficult. To share the museum's history and accomplishments, we'll have to go back to the very beginning. In 1976, a group of citizens, newcomers, if you will, like most of you, decided that we should have a bicentennial parade and celebration. So we went to the city fathers who had planned nothing and asked them that their approval for letting us do this. And they were very happy that we wanted to, and they gave us some seed money to go with the festivities. And it was a fun time for everybody. Also, when it was over, the money that was left, the Historical Society group that had been, the Historical Society wasn't formed at that time, but this group of volunteers decided that we needed to form a historical society and preserve the history of this community because it was so rich. So those of us who decided to enter this campaign, if you will, we got together and we met at the old City Hall, which is where the bicycle shop is now. And it was very tiny where the audience is. And there was a jail cell in the back of it. And one cell, and which wasn't used very often. And Linda and Larry Lamb, who at that time lived in the Culpeper house and were restoring it, were heading up the group, and she was our first president. And Bob and Sue Markle, who lived in the Victorian house, which is number 10 on the drive-in tour, and number 10 Standing Rock Road, but is catty-cornered to us across the street. Now belongs to Bill and Nancy Tyre. I won't tell you everything I know about that. Elizabeth Lunsford was part of that group, Ann and Coral Knowles, who lived at 163 C.B. Street, and they're number 25 on the drive-in tour. Joanne and Chuck Utt, who at the time lived at 441 Pilot Street, which is number 13 on the drive-in tour, which is now known as the Thompson House. Sam and Virginia Chanel also was a part of that group, and they lived at 291 Pilot Street, number 24 on the drive-in tour, where Dub and Mary Pierman live now. Jean and Amelia Wolf lived at 418 Pilot Street at the corner of Pilot and Johnson, which is now being restored. Elizabeth Lunsford lived at the little cottage on Baggerly Way, between where Trey lives and where the Brantley house was. It was much tinier than you see it today. It looked nothing like that now. And including Bill and myself, we were referred to as the Hysterical Society. And nobody locally that had always been here could not understand why we thought this was so important. And however, they finally realized that we were actually serious about this. And so we were actually joined by some of the important community families at that point. Frank Jr. and Virginia Holberg, Jim Sr. and Ruby Baggerly, Ray and Edith Sewell, who is Hal's parents, Mary Brantley Todd, and Winfred Adamson. They contributed much history for the background of Senoia and knowledge about the town and the ancestors. And they were a great support group. We could not have done it without their support and knowledge. 1977 to 1991, there were many fundraisers through Christmas is Ours. One of the first was our tea. We had a bingo night, progressive dinners, community cookbooks, beautification projects. The first beautification project was the sign you see out there at the corner now. At the time, we decided that we needed to put it at Broad and 16. which the only thing that was there at the time was a grass median and the parking lot for what is now the Hit and Run. But it was actually just a little country store at the time. And so we built a box, and we had the sign made by a craftsman, and it just said Historic Senoia, and it pointed up this way, up Main Street, up Broad to Main. And everybody will find this amusing because there was no Brooks Marketplace. That was just a vacant lot. And so Ellis Crook was disappointed that we were putting a sign there and took away 2 of his parking spaces in the medium. But he got over it. And then we went on to do, that was our first beautification project. And then we went on to join the city in doing the dogwood trees, they still are around on the right-of-ways. And we also did, we also worked with the city and encouraged them to do the other trees that's in the medium. Down below. Crepe myrtles, thank you. We did that, and then we had the Macintosh Arts and Crafts Country Fair. And that was held at the City Street Park, and that was with permission of the city, and was named for Macintosh, for our connections with his family, Chief William specifically, whose mother, Senoia, who legend says that Senoia, the city, was named for. One of the fun facts that you will enjoy is our very first fundraiser was held in Bill and Nancy Tyer's house across the street when Bob and Sue Markle lived there, and we had a haunted house. And it's documented in our library on the front page of the Noonan Times Herald. It was then occupied by Bob and Sue. We charged 50 cents per child. And that was so each child in the neighborhood, in the city, could come and bring their friends. And it was a huge success. It was a lot of fun. Not much money, but that was okay. And we still do the kind of social events that include the community without really it being a fundraiser, which is very good for the community. On March the 7th, 1980, the society became incorporated, which was a huge accomplishment for us, being so small. September the 5th, 1980, the society became a nonprofit, tax-exempt entity for a 501c3, and quite again another feat for such a small organization that started with a parade. Also in 1980, the drive-in tour was established with 12 homes on the tour. This was accomplished with the support of Chattahoochee Planning Commission, which is now renamed to Three Rivers Planning Commission, and that encompasses several counties in our area. And in 1984, 12 additional homes were added to the drive-in tour. Macintosh, the descendant of Chief William, William McIntosh Jr., came with, and that's Chief Doug, came with his son Chanubi from Oklahoma to pay a visit and share some history with us. This celebration was open to the community, as most events are today, and held at the Senoia United Methodist Church in their fellowship hall. We had a covered dish supper, and Chief McIntosh taught and spoke with us and shared his history with us. He could not remember his grandmother's burial place, but he knew that he had heard that that Senoia was named for her namesake. And he was on his way to Indian Springs, where they were having a big celebration for the signing of the Treaty of 1825, when Chief William signed away the lands of the Creek Nation. And that was decried by all the Creek Nations. And so it was declared a failure. And in 1826, they went back and did it again. And he had support of some of the Creek chiefs, under chiefs. And so they were able to do this with the help of the governor True from the state of Georgia, who was Chief McIntosh's cousin. And so he came here a second time, and at that time we were honored to have him in our home, and we had him and some other society members there with us for dinner, and he played our piano that sits in the hallway, and that was fun. And the next day, Mary Brown, who had moved here and resided at the Culpeper House, and organized the first B&B in the county. She and Joanna and I accompanied Chief Doe to Indian Springs the next day for their celebration, where Chief William had built the Indian Springs Hotel. We were able during this period of time to have a display at City Hall, which was in the new City Hall, and which was a little larger. And we were able to have a small display there, which was great. Just to have some visibility for anybody who came into the community. And in March of 1989, our application was approved not only by the state, but for the National Trust, for Senoia to be approved to be placed on the National Register of Historic Places. So, of course, another celebration involved from that. Main Street was closed. An official, I believe her name was Dr. Elizabeth Lyons, came down from the State Department of Natural Resources and Historic Trust and presented to the mayor of Senoia the designation for the historic district. And to the citizens, as a note of information, the society paid for a professional to write the application for this to be considered as a historic district. Some homes, historic, are no longer standing that were in the application, including the Ginn property. Several barns and tenant houses were on that property as well, which were historic. They are long gone. We continue to lose many historic homes. If this continues, will we lose our designation? That's something to think about. October 14th, 1989, the governor of the state proclaimed Senoia Day in Georgia. So don't forget that, to celebrate that day. July 19th, 1990, the society purchased this property and house from the proceeds left over from the McIntosh Arts and Crafts Fair. Our seed money came from the closure of the fair, and I wanted to share with you that the co-sponsors of the fair was shared with the Senoia Lions Club and the Senoia Masonic Lodge. The Lions Club has become defunct in the last few years. Senoia Masonic Lodge is still very active. But we decided that there was so much competition with arts and crafts festivals, and we didn't have the manpower or the money to carry forward with it. So that money was split 3 ways. It was left in the treasury, and we took our money in addition to the different fundraisers. There were many people in town who never became members of the Historical Society, even today, but were very big supporters of what we were doing and shared information with us. A lot of them had artifacts that they would have wanted to share with us, but we had no place to put them. So, I'm going to let somebody else talk. However, I did want to continue being passionate about Senoia's history. And I would like for all of you to remember that it was newcomers like yourself that started this organization. And it's important that young people are involved, because without newcomers and young people, we can't go far. Also, I would like to commend Maureen for her dedication, direction, organization skills, and energy toward building what you see here today as our museum. I'm sorry. I do want to pass this around. While I'm looking for it, I will tell you this. Bill Tarr shared with me the other evening that in 1990, when they moved here, he could not imagine why Nancy wanted to buy that old house across the street, or why the Historical Society would involve their money in this old house that was about to fall down. So, thank you, Bill, for sharing it.
I said the coffee shop would never survive. So I've been wrong on 3 counts.
I just want to pass these along, and y'all can just share them as everybody else talks. But these are 2 brochures that I found in my care from the Macintosh Fair, and I thought you all might be interested in seeing that. There were about 100 exhibitors each year. It was a lot of fun, and we had History Museum in the Freeman Thatcher building, which was coordinated by Jim Baggerly Sr. And we also had artists and craftsmen's exhibits that they actually manned and shared with us their talents. And it was just a fun time. I'll stop.
You also might want to take a look when you get up from your seats at the photo you see up here, the newspaper article. That is Nancy in Chief Doe McIntosh's headdress. Standing beside him, you might want to take a look at that later when the meeting is over.
That was fun too.
Thanks, Nancy. Bringing us into our recent past, Hal Sewell is going to look back at the past 10 years. Hal has the distinction of being a lifelong Senoia resident, and his father a charter member of the Historical Society. His father's photo is in our history room as he donates the impressive 1921 map of Coweta County to the Society. Hal?
Good evening. I'd like to, well, first of all, I make no guarantees about getting through this without making a fool of. But I would like to review some of the highlights associated with our museum, especially since we started the museum in 2010. That was in July of 2010 when it was open to the community. My wife Vicki, who's sitting over there, saw the announcement in the Times Herald and suggested that we become involved with the Historical Society. Well, when I was growing up, I heard a lot of people refer to it as the Historical Society, and I didn't really have an inclination to get involved with it, but we were both retired. She talked me into it, as wives sometimes have a tendency to do. And we joined either in late 2010 or early 2011. Both of my parents, as Nancy mentioned, were charter members, Ray and Edith Sewell. I have a little bit more to say about them, I think, a little later. But Vic and I are both really glad that we got involved with the Historical Society and museum team. In 2011, Bonnie Bobbitt's bike tours began, and she accumulated a lot of history about Senoia, and that has since been turned over to the museum. We were also given a large number of pictures and documents that year, 2011, that were associated with a school project from Eastside School from 5th grade The name of the project was Stepping Back, Looking Forward. And we also that year acquired the Olympic Torch Relay banner. 2012, we created our research library from a storage area that was filled in the back with rusty shelving. Looks a lot better today. 2013, we installed the signage at Couch in Maine and acquired our large 1898 map. And if you haven't seen the map, it's in the research library in the back. And I would encourage you to look at that. It's always, to me, one of the more interesting parts of our tours. And there are a lot of interesting parts, I have to say. 2014, our black display cases began appearing, thanks to the kindness first of Callie Weldon, and many others have been very generous with their time, their talents, and their financial resources. And it's all very much appreciated. 2015, as good stewards of the building, we reinforced our floors. Now, I did this the other night. The glass doors don't vibrate anymore.
Everything used to shake. Everything used to shake.
Yeah, we had a whole lot of shaking going on. And in 2015, we also put on a new roof. 2016, Sam Bellisle built our access ramp in the back as his Eagle Scout project. 2017, the newsletter was started for our organization, and Susan Stitt is the editor of that, and we appreciate her efforts. 2018, the gallery rooms of the museum were redesigned to better flow based on a starting point from the beginning of that story we tell through more current aspects of our area's history. In 2019, we recreated the porch railings and balustrade, which is a fancy word for spindles, with financial assistance from a grant that was initiated by, it was made available through the Daniel Newman branch of the Daughters of the American Revolution. And Doug Pearman, our immediate past president, was our project manager on that initiative, and Frank Zeidler, it's my understanding, wrote the actual paperwork that resulted in our getting that grant. Also in the recent past, our Memorial Day displays, candlelight tour of homes involvement, annual afternoon teas, and special February events have helped us further share our history while publicizing our efforts to the local community and beyond. In addition to sharing these facts about the life of our museum, I'd like to share a few examples that my wife Vicki and I have been privileged to experience that I think help show the importance of our museum, not only to ourselves, but also to those who visit here. I'd like to start with a family visit that was paid to Senoia in July of 2018, July 28th. And that's when Don Powers and his wife and their son, this is Don Powers Sr. Don was a former Senoia resident who now lives in the Dothan, Alabama area. And they visited our museum for the first time that day. Mr. Powers was 83 years old, and he shared many interesting bits of information regarding his family, including the following. Bill McDowell was the first owner of the Senoia movie theater, which was downtown on Main Street, just below Holberg's Furniture, where the Masonic Lodge is today. And Mr. Powers worked at the movie theater and sold popcorn. He ate so much popcorn during his employment that he will not eat popcorn to this day. Mr. Powers' grandfather was Ernest Powers. He ran a general merchandise store on Main Street from 1904 to 1916. It was where Beyond the Door is today, and more important to me, that's where my family's general merchandise store was starting in 1946. Grandfather, Ernest, Don Powers' grandfather, owned the house across the street from the Methodist Church, right on the corner at Seavey and Bridge Street. It's currently the home of Jane Whitehurst. And Don Sr. and his sister, Billy Ruth, as she was known then, but she's now known as Ruth, lived there with their grandparents. Sister Ruth was one of the switchboard operators at the phone company building that was next to their home. And it's almost across the street from the veranda today. I think it's a great, smaller building. That was the phone switchboard for Senoia. A lot of you have heard the story, and I wasn't planning on sharing, but when I was a boy, I would pick up the phone, crank the handle, and tell this voice, who I had no idea who she was, but I'd say, I want to speak to Mama. And she would connect me to Sewell's General Merchandise.
It's a great story,
Don Sr., who was visiting that day, attended Brantley Institute, the school here, and he remembers Callie Weldon, who is one of our members of our Historical Society, and she would often beat up some of the local boys in town. And Don enjoyed seeing her BB gun that's in one of the rooms across the hall. On February 8th, 2019, only about 6 months after their first visit, it meant so much to the Powers family that they returned for a second visit. And this time they brought Sister Ruth and other family members. Arrangements were made to show them the house that Mr. Powers' grandparents had owned, and Jane Whitehurst gave a tour. We also gave them a tour of the Methodist Church where the family members and ancestors had worshiped. And we learned from Don Powers Jr. that one of the memorial windows in the Methodist Church was donated by Ernest Powers for his aunt, Cornelia Green, who had helped raise Ernest's two younger sisters. We learned some interesting history from the Powers' first visit, and that was great. We learned more history and made connections with other people and places during the second visit, and that was very special. Almost a year later to the day, on July 27th, 2019, we had another family to visit, and similar name, but instead of Powers, the last name was Powell. And Ron Powell, age 77 at this time, brought his family to visit our museum. He lives in Lakeland, Florida now, but he lived in Senoia from 1945 to 1953. They lived in a house going back down Pilot Street. As you cross the railroad tracks, theirs was the first house on the left. It has since burned down, but it was next to the house where Doug and Mary Pierman live today. While they were visiting with us, Mr. Powell mentioned once or twice some similarities to this building and this structure to where he lived as a boy after their house burned down. Because actually, his parents separated, and after they separated, Ron and his older brother lived with their father in a house. And it turned out they lived in the back 2 rooms of this building. And we didn't realize it till the very latter part of their visit that day. And Vicki observed him talking about that as a possibility. She said, would you like to see the back area? Yeah, and he was in a wheelchair, but he could get around a little bit. And we took him in the back, and he realized this was his home. And I had since talked with another local resident, Bobby Hatchett. And Bobby remembers Ron and his brother living here with their father. They visited that day. They got here about, well, just shortly after 1 o'clock, which is when we open. And usually we close at 4 o'clock. We were having such a good time that it was 5 o'clock or after before they left. But they told us that they had a wonderful visit. A couple of things that Mr. Powell shared about growing up in Senoia was he also worked in the movie theater. He delivered groceries for Addie's Grocery, which is about where Fox Hollow is today, the antique store. And the 2 Addie sisters at Addie's Grocery made the legendary hot dogs that were the best in the world. And and I've had a number of them, and I can guarantee you they were very good. He also enjoyed killing rats in the back of Mr. Ben Nolan's grocery store, which is now Senoia Coffee and Cafe. They got paid for doing that, and he just had a lot of stories. The whole time he was here, he was talking about growing up in Senoia, and he had a most sincere smile on his face the entire afternoon. His family videoed much of the exchange, and they're planning to share some of that video with us later. When Vicki and I closed up after they left, Vicki counted $240 that had been left in the jar out there, the donation jar, of either donations or items that especially the Powell family purchased while they were here. And they purchased more stuff than I'd ever sold here. And I think all of that money was from them. They really enjoyed the day. Ron's daughter, Barbara, has continued to stay in touch with me, and she's mentioned that they are hoping to return to the museum before the end of the year. And this last one's a little, it's the hardest one to talk about, but I hope I can do better than I did the other night. Sadie Lindsay. Sadie Lindsay was born in Senoia in 1927. My mother, Edith Sewell, was born in Senoia. Well, she was Edith Crook, Ellis's older sister. She was born in 1915, but even though there was a gap in their ages, they were really close friends growing up. They stayed close friends. Sadie lived in that house that Nancy referred to earlier on what's now Bagley Way, to the right of where Trey and Kristen Bagley live. The one that's recently been extensively renovated. It looks great. It was much smaller back in the day. It has been identified as the Spear-Sullivan home, but we haven't been able to determine that any Sullivan really lived there. But Sadie's mother died when Sadie was about 4 or 5 years old, and she was raised by her aunt Virginia, or Jenny Spear, who helped raise her. Sadie loved Senoia. She really did. She had shared that love with her second husband, Oliver. And when he died in 2006, he was buried in the Senoia City Cemetery, even though he had never lived in Senoia. He had visited here with Sadie a number of times. But he and Sadie knew that one day they would both be buried here. Vicki and I tried to stay in touch with Sadie after my mother died in 2006. But at one point, she just almost fell off the grid. We couldn't find her. We tried and we tried and we almost gave up, but we eventually found out that she was in a nursing home in Brookhaven, above Atlanta. And we got in touch with her son finally. And he was living in Sadie's house in Atlanta. And we happened to tell him about the museum because we knew that it would mean a lot to Sadie. And he volunteered to gather some of Sadie's items from her days growing up in Senoia. And also she had things stored from West Georgia College that she had attended. So we went back to his home after he collected things up, and we loaded up the car, and it was full. We made a list and took it to Sadie when we visited her at the nursing home. She approved everything to be donated to either the museum or to West Georgia College, except for one family photo album that she wanted her daughter to have. Fortunately, these items, including a stool that was used in the north-south passenger train that had a depot down off of Seavey Street where the tracks are down there. But there was that stool from the passenger train along with a number of other items, and they all found a new home. And we're glad they did because approximately a year later, her house in Atlanta burned down and everything was lost. This year. The graveside service was in Senoia. on June 11th at the city cemetery. Volunteers in our historical society made themselves available to host Sadie's family and friends after the burial. And this was, I believe, the first time that the Historical Society has reached out to a family like this, and it was greatly appreciated. Vicki and I were out of town and couldn't help, but when we went to Sadie's memorial service about 2 weeks later in Brookhaven, the pastor who performed both of the services thanked us for what the organization did. He even mentioned it during the memorial service. These examples are just from the last year, roughly. So you can only imagine how many times people have been genuinely impacted by our museum and the story we tell since 2010. You can also only imagine how many times our docents have been genuinely impacted by the stories offered by so many of our visitors, along with their reaction and comments about the many items in our museum. It's a blessing to be involved with the museum team and to have Maureen as our museum director. If you're not already a member of the society, I strongly encourage you to join. It's not a hysterical society like it used to be.
Sometimes.
Well, sometimes we have fun. If you're not already involved in sharing our history as a docent or in some other helpful way, I encourage you to please do so. Like me, I think you'll be glad you did. And as one of our docents who will be speaking in just a few minutes, Martha Sanford, next to me, she commented in an email about the Powell's family visit. Being a docent creates opportunities to meet some amazing people and learn more about Senoia. I'd like to add that you don't have to be born and raised in Senoia like I was. We can all gain pleasure from sharing history about the Senoia area, and that includes sharing with other people who used to live here and listening to them. Thank you.
All right, before we step into 2019, I'd like to ask Bonnie Bobbitt to come forward. Bonnie? For 6 years, starting in 2011, Bonnie Bobbitt conducted her iconic 10 bike tours of the historic sites here in Senoia. She did a lot of research, she spent a lot of time, and we are so, so grateful for that. She donated all the proceeds to every bike tour back to the society. Bonnie, it gives me great pleasure to thank you in the name of the Senoia Area Historical Society. Thank you. Please accept this as our appreciation.
This is a fun shot.
Of course. Oh, you too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. If you weren't here when we did those bike tours, they really were an amazing afternoon, and Bonnie just deserves so much credit for that. So, okay, our present accomplishments are evident to all of us as we move forward in the best possible ways. Today we have amazing programming begun by Lynn Horton and continued on with Beth Young. Later this month we're going to have a fun social event, painting pumpkins here. So keep that in mind if you'd like to do that. And of course our meet and greet with Dr. Gary McIntosh. Our railings and balusters out front show great curb appeal and hint at all the treasures we have inside. Our whiskey evening, similar to our wine pairing, will be in October, and our annual auction in November. Our volunteers will be creating our 2019 limited edition commemorative ornament, and we will be the refreshment stop this year on the candlelight tour of homes. But best of all, as we reached 2019 and near the end of 2019, we have continued to keep these doors open as a history museum, thanks to dedicated volunteers and docents. But don't take my word for it. Martha Sanford and Beth Young would like to share some of their thoughts and maybe convince some of you to join this museum team. Martha?
Welcome, everyone. We are so fortunate, aren't we, to have this historic house that's dedicated to preserving so many local treasures and showcasing the evolution of Senoia. The museum is open on Friday and Saturday from 1 to 4 p.m. free of charge. Members walk through the front door and they step back in time. A museum docent greets them with a smile and guides them on a tour telling the story of Senoia. So our job tonight is to encourage you to consider becoming a docent. I'm a docent because being a relative newcomer to Senoia, not being a native to the South or ever living in a small town, I wanted to know more of the history of this area, both the past and the present. But how? So it was my good fortune to meet Maureen, whose boundless energy and love for this museum was the way. I wanted to get involved, so I filled out a membership application. I knew that volunteering here would be fun and interesting, that I'd meet people, and that I could help a very worthy 501c3 organization as needed. I attended a docent training led by Maureen, and I received a folder with all the information that I need. Signing up online for my docent days is really easy, and part of what I do is keep track of the number of visitors and any donations. I give them a membership application and tell them of upcoming events, ask them to sign our visitor book, and pin their hometown location on the wall map. Having more than one docent per day is best because we often have more than one visitor at a time. And as you begin your tour, and yes, it gets easier every time you do it, you'll be surprised at how often visitors will share their knowledge and their memories with you while looking at the artifacts. One day, I had a woman who was a seamstress, and she was looking at the sewing machine donated by Mr. Holberg. And she showed me that the machine is fitted with a hemming stitch attachment, and told me that the needle goes back and forth instead of in a straight line. I never would have picked that out. And she was so pleased to see that the machine, built in the 1800s, was so well preserved. Another day, a young mom and her 3 children came to the museum. She was homeschooling, and coming here was part of her lesson plan. Her son and her 2 daughters asked lots of questions about the Creek Indians and Chief McIntosh and his mother, Princess Senoia. They weren't aware that our town was named in her honor. I told them about the trains, and that at one time 8 passenger trains and several freight trains stopped in Senoia every day, and that the telegraph was their only means of communication. And everyone loves the insanely loud mechanical bell on the front door. There you go. Getting to know other docents and knowing them and listening to their visitor tours is really a great way to expand your knowledge. I've been asked questions that I don't have an answer for, but I always tell visitors that we have an extensive research library that they can utilize, and often there is a museum staff member on hand to consult. For me, being a docent is really rewarding. I get to make visitors feel welcome to our town, tell the story of Senoia and its wonderful history. So I hope I've encouraged you to consider becoming a docent. We all want to meet people and make friends, and I've been very fortunate to find that here.
Thanks, guys. We appreciate you being here tonight. You're probably so tired of hearing my story, but I'm going to tell just a little bit more. When my husband and I moved here about 2 years ago, we were trying to figure out how to plant some roots and kind of get going with our new town. We didn't know a soul except each other. And every time we came into town, we passed the museum, and I thought, what a great way to start. Just learn about Senoia and its history, and meet people. So my first day in, the docent on duty that day was Lynn Horton, who's here today. I can't help it, I'm sorry. It makes me emotional because as I walked through the museum, she shared the passion that she had for history, and it wasn't rehearsed, it was natural, and it was just a lovely experience. So Tom was sitting in the car thinking I was just going to run in and say hello. So half an hour later, I was like, wow, this place is awesome. And she gave me a membership form, which we filled out, and it's been the best decision we ever made. We've made fast friends and really had such a good time being here. But that was in maybe early May of 2017. So our first meeting to attend as a couple was maybe in July. And we were kind of struggling, you know, well, what do you wear to a history museum meeting, and you know, I wonder what it's going to be like. And so we probably dressed up a little more than we should have. And we walked in, and at the time, Doug Pierman was president. And so he began the business meeting by leading the Pledge of Allegiance, which meant so much to us. We thought, you know, folks don't do that anymore, so we were so thrilled that they did. But the thing that got us was Doug stood up in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, and my husband looked at me like, we found our people. So as you can see, it's very casual, laid back, and it's such a great group of folks. That same year in November, we attended our first auction, and if you've never been to an auction, I mean, it is a riot. It is so much fun. We stood in the back because we still didn't know anybody, and there were bidding wars over cakes and pies, and we had a fur coat that year that just, you know, the numbers went out the roof. And so it's a wonderful fundraiser for the society, but it's tons of fun, and it's a great way to hang out and meet folks. So we hope you would do that. I will just tell you really quickly a couple of stories. You've heard about how great it is to be a docent, and it is. It's not the only way you can volunteer. There are other options, but being a docent is, oh, and by the way, you don't have to be blonde to be a docent. Just throwing that in.
But it's more fun.
But it's more fun. But we had, about a month or so ago, we had a member of the Byram family. So this building has been owned only by 4 people, and the Historic Society is number 4. So there were the McKnights, the Carmichaels, and then the Byram family. And so this sweet lady came in, and she said, my grandparents lived here, the Byram family, and she told us that as she came as a child, this wall was still in place. And so this room was Grandma's front room, and you did not play in the front room. So I'm thinking, okay, you know, we got a limited number of rooms in this house already, and if one's off limits, you know, that's not a lot left. But they were the first family, I believe, that had a kitchen in the back room, the 3rd room on the left, and she talked about the kitchen being there. And so it was just fabulous to hear someone who had actual memories of a relative living here. And then, as Maureen mentioned, we had as our guest just last Friday, Dr. Gary McIntosh, and Martha and I were on duty that day, and we had just opened, and we were standing in this first room to the left looking at the Native American case and just talking about, you know, how fascinating it was. And I was asking Martha questions, and she was sharing information, and the door opens. And this sweet couple walk in, and he stuck his hand out, and he said, hi, my name's Gary McIntosh. I'm the grandson of Chief Toad McIntosh. And we just, you know, we're going, what? So, I mean, what a fabulous surprise to have them walk in the door. And we, instead of stepping into our normal tour routine, we walked them right into that room and showed them the case and said, well, gosh, here's your granddad, here's a picture of Nancy in his headdress. And we had the best visit, and they stayed the whole, for about 3 hours. Yeah, I was texting as fast as I could, Maureen, get here, we got Gary here. You want to tell the story about where they're from?
Well, that was fun for me because they walked in the door and they said, we always say, where are you from? And he said, well, You're not going to know where it is. It's Temecula, California. Well, that's where Dennis and I moved from. I said, yes, I do know where that is.
We have a ball here, and we would love for you to join us and be a docent as well. But again, thanks for coming tonight.
So this brings us to our bright future. Deb Flock is going to take just a minute to tell us about an exciting project that we hope happens for 2020. That's a student summer camp here for a week. So it's a project that's come up countless times whenever we brainstormed about how we can grow and help the community. And taking this direction toward children is a really worthy one, and one that Deb will be able to help us make. And all she needs are probably some like-minded volunteers. Deb?
Yes, we will. Thank you. Welcome to Camp Senoia. That is how we'll greet our youth campers this summer, this coming summer. We're planning a week-long camp for children ages 6 to 12. Campers will be actively engaged as they learn about the past. As with all camps, our campers will enjoy songs, crafts, sports, and activities as they learn and have fun. Our goal is to inspire not only our campers, but their parents, families, and friends. As we do this, we hope to grow our membership, as well as become a new source of funding for the Historical Society. We've had our first committee meeting, and the next is set for October 2nd at 7 p.m. If you'd like to be a part of this adventure, please join us here on October 2nd. If you don't feel you have the time to work on this project, but would like to assist in another way, that would be great too, because we're an equal opportunity committee, and we welcome everyone's help. Just add your name to the list that we have up here, and we'll get in touch with you. And finally, if you have or know any potential campers or teen volunteer counselors, please add them to our priority list. We will be offering registration to the whole community, but of course we'd like to give priority to our members and their families. So thanks, and we look forward to making Camp Senoia a summer tradition.
Thanks, Deb. Oh, the future. Because he's always planning and working the big picture, who better to show us about our future than our illustrious president, Doug Kolbenslag. Doug?
All right, well, thanks, Maureen. Good evening, everybody. We start off with Nancy. She sort of talked about the founding back in 1977, 42 years ago, right? What she didn't tell you was that she was one of the founding board members that signed the paperwork that went downtown in the state of Georgia 2 years later, or 3 years later in 1980. Nancy, we are today a historical, Senoia Area Historical Society, is what it is because of you and your vision that you pushed me along. Everything you heard tonight started with that lady right down there, and a few others. But she's been on the journey the whole time with that. So thank you so much for that. You heard Hal talk about the importance of sharing and preserving Senoia's history since it was opened in 2010, the museum. Martha and Beth talked about the excitement of being a docent. I've been a docent as well as many of you out there. It's pretty amazing. The stories they told, every docent's experienced that many times. Almost every time you're a docent, you're going to have someone come in that's just amazed at what the museum has put together here. It's pretty cool. It's really, it's life-changing when you talk to some of those people and see. It's a great experience. So what does the future look like? Well, I'm glad to report the future looks really, really bright. We are financially stable. We're probably in the best financial condition we've ever been in. I think, you agree with that, Evan?
I would think so, yeah.
We appreciate what you do to help us keep us there. So that's a great thing. We're able to fund capital improvements. You heard Hal talk about the roof, the floor, the ramp, the porch out there that we got a matching grant for, and we have another one coming on soon that you're going to be hearing about. We're going to be doing a paver walkway.
Museum walk.
museum walk. And Dennis here is going to head up and coordinate that project for us. So you'll be hearing more about that over the next coming months. So it'll go from the walkway there.
Can we say what's gonna be special about those bricks?
We can. You'll be able to purchase a brick and have it engraved and donated to honor somebody with that. So, but there'll be a lot more coming with that and more details in the future. I don't want to rain on Dennis's parade as he puts that information out there. So be looking out for it. It's going to be a great, great project. We have more corporate sponsors than ever before. We got 12 right now. We got Edward Jones, Jennifer Camp, downtown Senoia, Coffee by David, Norcom, Table Talk, Senoia Coffee and Cafe, Creekside Business Partners, Katie News, the DDA, Peachtree Pediatric Dentistry, the Veranda, Senoia Bike Shop, and Morgan Street Media Services. These are some of the people out there, the corporate partners that keep us going and allow us to do what we do. Everyone's important. The volunteers are important. The corporate sponsors are as well. So if you see them, thank them, visit their businesses. Our members, that's all of you, are actively involved in preserving the history and sharing the history. We're a 100% volunteer organization. So think about that. Think about the budget. Think about the museum here, and think about all the events. That's 100% volunteer work, no paid staff. That's pretty amazing when you think about it. A lot of folks out there doing great things. So what is the board doing to make sure we keep that momentum going, to continue to honor the folks like Nancy, like Hal, and Maureen with the museum, and everyone else out here has gotten us so far already? We heard Deb mention that we're looking at ways to expand our offerings to include